I used to think love was enough, that if you stood beside someone through their struggles, celebrated their small wins, and prayed for their success harder than your own, it would mean something. I believed loyalty was a language he understood. I was wrong. When we first met, he wasn't a billionaire. He was a dreamer with ambition and a secondhand car that broke down every other week. We'd eat takeout on the floor of our tiny apartment and laugh about how one day we'd have a home with marble floors. Back then, every success felt like ours. Every step forward we took together. But the higher he climbed, the smaller I seemed to become in his world. It started subtly. Fewer smiles, shorter conversations, more business trips that didn't quite add up. I noticed how his tone changed when we were around his new circle, how he'd correct the way I spoke, or laugh a little too hard when someone joked about my simple taste. I still remember one night at a company dinner, a woman in a glittering dress told me, "You're lucky he still takes you to these things." I smiled, pretending it didn't sting, but it did, because deep down, I already knew. I was being slowly erased from the picture I helped paint. He began to speak in numbers and deals, not emotions. Every day became a transaction, my care in exchange for his indifference. He didn't notice when I stopped dressing up for him. He didn't see that I no longer waited for his calls. I was still his wife on paper, but somewhere along the way, I'd become a background character in the story of his success. The man who once said I was his piece now treated me like a pause in his busy schedule. The night it all shattered is still clear in my mind. I stood at the charity gala, wearing the same black dress I wore when he signed his first major deal. It used to be his favorite. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and laughter filled the hall. I was waiting near the entrance, thinking he'd come soon. When the doors opened and he walked in, the world seemed to stop. He had his arm around another woman, younger, flawless, draped in red silk that matched his tie. Reporters swarmed them, flashes painted the room white, and in that moment, I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a ghost watching her own life be replaced. He saw me standing there, but he didn't flinch. He just gave me a practiced smile, the kind you give a strangers, and whispered, "We'll talk later." I nodded, holding my tears hostage behind a trembling smile. Everyone whispered, everyone stared, but I stood still, my heart breaking in silence. That night, when I took off that black dress, I looked in the mirror and realized something. I hadn't lost him that evening. I'd lost him a long time ago. I just hadn't accepted it yet. And while he was busy trading love for luxury, I was about to learn that sometimes being not enough for someone small minded means you're meant for something far greater. The morning he told me he wanted a divorce, there was no fight, no shouting, no tears, just an empty silence that echoed louder than any argument could. He sat across from me at the breakfast table, the same table we once dreamed of buying together, and said in a calm voice, "We've grown apart. You want different things now?" I remember staring at him, wondering when we became you and I. He didn't look up. He didn't even have the decency to pretend that it hurt him. He said I'd be taken care of, as if money could fill the space where respect used to live, as if signing a few checks could erase the years I'd spent building him up when the world doubted him. I told him to keep it, every car, every mansion, every piece of jewelry he'd ever gifted me. I didn't want a single reminder of a man who valued things over people. All I took was my dignity, a suitcase, and a heart that finally understood what peace costs. The papers came quickly. His lawyers were efficient. His mistress, now proudly parading on social media, wasted no time posting photos of them vacationing on private beaches, sipping champagne like they'd earned the right to celebrate. People who used to smile at me at parties suddenly pretended not to know me. Some even whispered that I was the one who couldn't keep a man. It's funny how success makes people rewrite the story to favor the one holding the gold pin. I moved into a small apartment on the quiet side of town. Gone were the marble floors and ocean views, replaced by creaky stairs and morning light slipping through thin curtains. But for the first time in years, I could breathe. No cameras, no expectations, just me, raw, bruised, and rebuilding. Nights were the hardest. The silence felt heavy and memories replayed like a cruel movie. But every tear I shed washed away a piece of the woman who lived for someone else's validation. The world laughed when I fell, but what they didn't see was the strength that was forming underneath that fall. I started freelancing again. Small design projects at first, then larger contracts. My old clients remembered the woman I used to be, reliable, creative, sharp. Slowly, I started remembering her too, the one who had dreams long before she became the billionaire's wife. There were days when loneliness whispered that I'd lost everything. But then, I'd look at myself in the mirror and realize I hadn't lost everything. I just lost the things that weren't real, the love that was conditional, the friends who were convenient, the life that looked perfect but felt hollow. He thought divorcing me would end my story. But in truth, it only ended the chapter where he existed. What he didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that the woman he dismissed as ordinary was about to rise in a way no one could predict. Starting over was terrifying. When you've spent years being someone's shadow, the light feels too bright at first. I remember waking up one morning, the city still quiet, and realizing that no one was expecting me. No breakfast to make, no schedule to follow, no one to impress. It was just me in the silence. For a while, that silence felt like punishment, but slowly, it became peace. I began filling it with purpose. I dusted off my old laptop and updated my resume, though even that felt foreign. My hands trembled as I typed, but I did it anyway. I applied for jobs I wasn't sure I'd get and took interviews that reminded me how much of myself I had set aside to fit into his world. When a small consulting firm hired me as a project coordinator, I nearly cried. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No one there cared who I used to be. They just cared if I could deliver, and I did. Every challenge became fuel. Late nights didn't scare me anymore. I'd lived through worse. When clients doubted me, I smiled and proved them wrong. When someone underestimated me, I let my results speak louder than my past. I learned again how powerful it feels to earn your own respect. I started dressing for myself, walking with quiet confidence that didn't need validation. For the first time in years, I felt like a woman rebuilding her foundation, brick by steady brick. Within a year, I had become one of the firm's most trusted leaders. I was managing major accounts, traveling internationally, and sitting in meetings where my ideas were finally heard. I poured everything I had into my work, not out of revenge, but out of gratitude. Gratitude that life had forced me to rediscover who I was without the weight of someone else's shadow. Then one day, opportunity knocked in a way I didn't expect. A global investment company reached out, offering me a position to lead a new division focused on corporate restructuring. I almost laughed when I saw the offer, not out of disbelief, but because I realized the irony. I had spent years trying to fix a broken marriage. Now I was being paid to fix broken empires. I took the job without hesitation. The work was intense, but I loved every second. Strategy meetings, negotiations, leadership calls. It was a world that once intimidated me, but now it felt like home. Late one evening, while reviewing a client list, I froze when I saw a familiar name. His company. The man who once told me I wasn't fit for the business world. The irony hit me like a wave. My firm had just acquired his struggling company for restructuring oversight. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Not with bitterness, but with quiet satisfaction. Life had come full circle. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't chase it. I just worked, healed, and let time do its work. They say success is the best revenge, but I don't agree. Peace is, and I had both. The day of the meeting, I woke up calm, the kind of calm that comes when you've already fought every battle worth fighting. I wasn't nervous, not even when I realized who was walking into that boardroom. 3 years ago, his opinion could have broken me. But now, I'd learned that nothing anyone says can define you once you've defined yourself. I arrived early, as always. My assistant placed the agenda neatly before me, the company logo shining on the glass table, my company's logo. The room smelled of polished wood and power. I remember taking a slow breath, letting the weight of it all settle. Then the door opened. He walked in, confident, tailored suit, that same practiced charm that once made me fall for him. Behind him trailed his new wife, the same woman who'd once smiled at me across a gala ballroom as if she'd won some prize. The irony wasn't lost on me. They both froze for a moment when they saw me sitting at the head of the table. For a brief second, his mask slipped. His eyes widened. Confusion, disbelief, and something else. Maybe guilt. He tried to recover, offering a stiff smile. "I didn't know you were with this firm," he said, voice cracking just enough for me to hear it. I smiled politely. "Oh, I'm not with this firm," I replied evenly. "I lead it." The silence that followed was delicious. You could have heard a pin drop. His wife shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply opened the meeting as if it were any other. As we went through the agenda, I outlined the restructuring plan for his company, a plan that required him to answer to us. Every word I spoke, I made sure was measured, professional, and precise. I didn't need to prove my worth. My presence was proof enough. His voice wavered when he responded to my questions, and I could see his confidence cracking with each passing minute. The man who once dismissed my ideas at our kitchen table now had to listen to every one of them, not as a husband, but as an employee. There was a moment halfway through the meeting when our eyes met. He looked at me the way a drowning man looks at land. Too far to reach, too late to save himself. I didn't look away, not out of pride, but peace. I had no anger left in me, only understanding. When the meeting ended, the board members congratulated me on the successful acquisition. I thanked them with a nod, gathered my papers, and rose. As I turned to leave, he spoke softly. "You've changed." I paused for a second and said, "No, I just stopped shrinking." Then I walked out, steady, composed, untouchable. That moment wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition, the quiet kind that doesn't need applause. In that boardroom, surrounded by men who once looked through me, I finally stood tall in the place he said I'd never belong. And this time, the only permission I needed was my own. After the meeting, I was gathering my files when I heard his voice behind me, quiet, almost hesitant. "Can we talk?" he asked. For a moment, I considered walking away, but something in his tone stopped me. I turned slowly, meeting the eyes of the man who once promised me forever. The same man who'd watched me crumble and never looked back. He looked older, somehow smaller than I remembered. The arrogance that used to hang from his every word was gone. "I didn't know," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I didn't know you'd become this." I smiled faintly. "You didn't think I could, you mean?" He lowered his gaze, shame flickering across his face. He started talking about regret, about how the woman he left me for wasn't what he imagined, how he missed the peace I brought into his life. Every word was soaked in nostalgia, but none of it touched me anymore. I listened in silence, not out of softness, but closure. "There's a difference." Finally, he said, "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." I just didn't see it. Then I took a slow breath and replied, "You didn't lose me because I wasn't enough. You lost me because you couldn't recognize enough when it was right in front of you." He looked at me, eyes wet, searching for forgiveness I no longer owed him. I gathered my papers and stood up. "Take care of yourself," I said quietly and started walking toward the door. As the glass door closed behind me, I felt no bitterness, just freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't his wife, his mistake, or his memory. I was simply me, whole, unapologetic, and finally at peace. In the months that followed, my life felt lighter, not because of what I gained, but because of what I released. The anger, the bitterness, the need to prove something. I no longer carried any of it. I had learned that real strength isn't loud or vengeful. It's quiet, grounded, and deeply self-assured. One afternoon, as I stood by my office window overlooking the city, I thought about how far I'd come. The same city where I once felt invisible now carried my name on building walls and boardroom doors. Yet, that wasn't what fulfilled me. What filled me was the peace of knowing I had built something honest, something that couldn't be taken away or defined by anyone else. I decided to start a mentorship program for women who'd been broken by betrayal or circumstance. Women who had been told they were too soft, too simple, or not enough. I wanted them to see what I had learned, that the world's opinion can't touch the worth you build from within. The first seminar I held was small, but when I saw the faces of those women, hopeful, brave, and healing, I felt something deeper than success. I felt purpose. Sometimes I still hear his name in business conversations. He's polite now, distant, humbled, but I don't feel anger anymore, only gratitude. Because if he hadn't left, I might never have found myself. And that's the truth of it. Some endings aren't failures, they're redirections. I didn't just survive losing him, I evolved beyond him. And that, I've learned, is the sweetest kind of victory. So, to anyone listening, don't chase revenge, chase growth. Because one day your peace will tell the story better than your pain ever could.